the needs of your children and this sense of wonder and magic and immortality, and you shouldn't dispel it for them before they are ready.
That is one thing that is not happening at schools today. They're making decisions that should be left to the parents, and that is really frustrating. Do you see this as a prescription for gender roles, like women should be obedient and subservient?
Hi, welcome back to God Literally, where we explore the Bible step by step. I'm your host, Susanna Skies, and I'm really excited to be joined today by a very special guest, my husband, Arvid. And today, together with him, we're going to explore chapters 2 and 3 of Genesis, where the creation of humanity, the Garden of Eden, the original sin, and the consequences of the original sin is discussed. If you'd like to listen to the full Bible readings that I've uploaded to my channel already, you'll find them in the description below and you can access them at any time. Arvid, thank you for joining me today. It's always fun to get your perspective on the Bible.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to share it.
So let's start with the creation of humanity, of man, actually, of Adam. He describes humanity as being formed from dust and God breathing into his nostrils the breath of life. What does that tell us about the relationship between God and us and our connection to the creation? What do you think?
One thing that's important to note is like this with breath and spirit, or ghost in the Catholic tradition. They are related if you look up the etymology of the words, like and if you look into a language like Swedish, spirit and breath are cognates, so they are related. So God gives us our breath, but that's also, our breath is God's spirit in a sense, and without it we wouldn't be. There would just be dust, right? The breath is like that which gives the dust life.
Right. But what do you think then in terms of animals? Because he didn't give the animals the breath of life, but they're not just dust either.
Does it say that he didn't, or maybe it's just omitted?
Well, I don't believe that the omission is an accident. It has meaning, a special meaning, and it makes humans special.
I am not sure that it is the breath of life that he gives us that makes us special, though.
Well, maybe if you think about it, he says he wants to create us in his image, right? And his likeness. Maybe that's what makes us more similar to God than animals.
I mean, it's even explicitly stated like that we become like God by eating from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and we are not like God before that point.
Well, he did create us in his likeness.
But we are not.
From the beginning, from the very beginning.
Yeah, but we lacked properties. Maybe we lacked properties that set us apart from, say, animals.
It could be. But I'm trying to understand why he did that for humans and not for animals, and what that difference implies.
The breath of life, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not so sure he didn't do it for them. But it's a bit hard to know in which order this is actually done. At what point does he give us the breath of life?
Well, it says, "And the Lord formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being."
Yeah, but does it say that the animals are not living beings, or that the trees are not living beings? That whole part only suggests that he gave us life. But life in and of itself is not enough to differentiate us from the rest of creation.
Maybe not. You think then it was an omission?
Yes.
That it happened, but it's just not written. Okay. Oh, and what do you think that the fact that we're made out of dust... What do you think that the fact that we're made of dust means in regards to the creation?
Well, we consist of two components. The breath of life that was given to us, and the dust. Without the breath of life, it would just be dust, right? Dust isn't alive, but the dust is necessary to give the breath of life form, make it tangible.
Now I want to kind of move on to the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is described basically as a paradise. God plans it, plants the most beautiful and edible trees, well, that provide fruit that are edible anyway. He's blessed it with gold and onyx, so it's full of natural resources, and he put Adam there. But among that beauty, there was also two distinct trees. One was the one with the knowledge of good and evil, and the other one was a tree of life. The question that came to me was, what is evil? I mean, for there to be knowledge of something, something must exist first, correct? So evil already existed. What is this evil, and where's it coming from?
As we were talking about in Genesis 1, it's a split here too, from unity into two different things, like good and evil. And good is that which is preferred by God, and evil is that which is detested by God. And I think the whole point of it is that before they eat of this fruit, they are not aware of these concepts. If you're not aware that you're doing evil, you're not really doing evil, because it's a conscious thing. Evil is something you have to be conscious of for it to have a moral dimension.
So where do you think the evil is coming from then?
It's part of creation, and it's part of the awareness of that which exists. It's a bit same as heaven and earth. I mean, you can't have good without evil. Everything can't be good. If everything is good, then nothing is good, because it doesn't mean anything. Good and evil give each other meaning. There's a discernment here and a judgment, that which is good and that which is evil. And it also boils down to a freedom to choose. If you don't have that freedom to choose, you aren't all there.
Well, you're not really good, are you? Because...
Well, I guess you are neither good nor evil.
Exactly. And if God is going to judge good from evil, we need to be able to do evil.
Yeah. And if God didn't want us to be able to do evil, he wouldn't have made us in the first place. Because that which can do neither good nor evil, like that which isn't even aware of it, it's not all there. It isn't fully conscious. It's more like almost like a machine.
A robot, yeah. And I guess then one could derive from that it was a test. He tested us from the beginning. That was our first test. He gave us one command: don't eat from this tree. Right. It was very clear, and we were tested. Because, I mean, he obviously wanted to test us, because otherwise the tree wouldn't have been there.
Right. It was in a sense, if you look at it like this, like God's word is law, and God is absolute. And if you break that law, you're diminishing God as well. And I think by breaking that law, you also lose paradise, because that you can only have when God is absolute. If you break his law, you no longer consider him absolute. He's no longer God.
Yeah, to dare to defy him is disrespectful.
Well, you clearly don't fear him, and if you don't fear God, then it can't really be God, can it?
Yes. Or it can be, but he'll have to remind us, I guess.
Yes.
Of why we should respect him.
But in your mind, in your awareness, you don't consider him absolute.
Well, maybe you first need to be confronted with the consequences of not considering him the most important thing, you know?
But prior to that point, it was likely inconceivable to them to act outside of the boundaries he set. They just reached a point where they transgressed, and that point of transgression changed everything. I mean, it marks the point when they no longer see God as absolute, like it's a challenge. They're challenging God's authority by doing it.
Yes. Yeah. They wanted to see how far God would go and how far they could go.
I suppose. The curiosity was stronger than the fear.
Yeah. But I guess we'll get deeper into the discussion of that moment shortly. Okay, so God puts Adam in the Garden of Eden and provides them everything that they need and more. What do you think was God's intention of this whole setup? Say in an ideal world, they were never tempted to eat the fruit, the forbidden fruit. What do you think life would have been like then?
Well, if they didn't have the possibility to do it, they wouldn't have had any moral agency, right? I think God wants us to be free to choose. So it had to be there, the possibility to.
So what you're saying is it was his intention for us to take from the forbidden fruit.
It was his intention to make it possible.
But if we hadn't done it, you're saying we wouldn't have had moral agency.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of is what he wanted.
Well, I don't know. Maybe he hadn't planned it all. We don't know. But well, maybe it was all a setup. But it's hard to know. I can't peek into the mind of God and know exactly what his plans were. But sure, he wanted to leave the possibility there for challenging his authority. Sure, and transgressing. Or maybe you can't have man without it. It's part of the package. It's not like he preached to the animals, you can do this, but you can't do that. He said it to man specifically. He created man because man needed to be instructed. Man is clearly different already from the start because of this particular thing, that there are certain rules that man must be taught and that man also can break.
Well, because we're the only ones that really understand the concept of rules anyway, right? I don't think, well, actually, dogs learn.
Yeah, but dogs learn differently. They learn by reward, and that reward needs to be quick. They don't behave in a certain manner because you tell them to.
No, it needs to be hammered in a different way. Yeah. So then God says it's not good for man to be alone. So he wants to create a helper comparable to him. So he starts creating the animals from dust, and then Adam names them, and they find that none of them are comparable to Adam. So then God takes a rib from Adam and creates the woman. Why do you think God chose to create women from the rib?
If he wanted her to be similar to Adam, she would have to be built from him, I suppose. If he were to make her from scratch, so that she wasn't derivative of Adam or part of him, they probably wouldn't turn out compatible, I guess.
Or as connected, right?
Well, if you look at man and woman, like they say that you are to be married and become one flesh. But that means you probably come from one flesh originally, and this is a unification of what was, let's say it was once, then it was split, and then it's a unification again. So it's
puzzle pieces coming back together.
Yes, if you look at the tree of life in mythology, how it's depicted, it is kind of this weave of separation and going together. So I guess it's related to that.
I actually found an interesting quote, and I have it here to read it to you about this. Okay, so this was stated by a guy called Matthew Henry. I did not investigate who he is, but I liked what he said.
Hi, this is Editing Susanna. Because it's never too late to learn something new, I dug up who Matthew Henry was. He was an English Presbyterian minister and Bible expositor, best remembered for his commentary on the whole Bible, a verse-by-verse devotional commentary spanning every book in the scripture. And he lived between 1662 and 1714. And this is what he said.
The woman was made of a rib out of the side of Adam, not made out of his head to rule over him, nor out of his feet to be trampled upon by him, but out of his side to be equal with him, under his arm to be protected, and near his heart to be beloved.
Sounds nice.
It's nice, isn't it? And it's interesting because it is a good point to say that it was the rib. It wasn't his foot. It wasn't his head. It wasn't his butt cheek. It was specifically his rib. You know, because another thing that was interesting was the word helper. At first, I felt a little bit uncomfortable by the word he needs a helper. I mean, what does that mean? Are we the help women? But then when I read that, I was like, actually, that's an interesting perspective, because then if you think about it in that way, you would consider God wanting women to be an equal of Adam, and together in harmony they were supposed to live. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to coexist, it has to be harmony and equal. I don't know, but maybe there was an idea about that originally, but I don't believe in that equality. I think equality is an ideal, but I don't think it really can exist in reality. So that was, maybe God was idealistic in his vision.
Yeah. And maybe that would have been possible, before we fell from Eden.
Well, I guess as long as you're children, in a sense, and you don't pull your own weight, you can be equal, because God can treat you as equals. Something else to note is that women are, in a sense, part man, right? And part woman. They get part of their makeup from the father and part of their makeup from the mother. But there's more than that also, because the man has the X and Y chromosome, but the woman only has the X chromosome, XX. In that sense, she's also just a part of the man, but not all of him.
Now I want to dive into the fall a little bit. So Adam and Eve are cruising around in paradise wearing nothing but their smiles. And all of a sudden, the serpent appears, right? And the serpent questions God's command to not eat from the forbidden fruit. And he targets Eve. Why do you think he targeted Eve and not Adam?
Well, I'm not so sure. It could be that it presages a greater pattern that repeats itself throughout history, that with women being temptress and man being that which is tempted. Might sound like a sexist thing to say, but it feels like it has a certain ring of truth to it.
Can we just also think about the way that the serpent tempted Eve? Can we reflect upon the tactics used by the serpent, and if they are used in today's tactics of temptation as well? Would you say there's a similarity?
I think the serpent exploited something which was omitted from God's law. I mean, God didn't say why they shouldn't eat from it, or he just said they would die. But the serpent said that they would become like God and know good and evil. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he told a different story, and that was probably quite tempting for Eve to be like God, because she loved God and looked up to him. And why wouldn't she want to be like that which she loves?
Thinking about the way people try to screw you over these days, right? There's always like this similarity. You have a problem, or you didn't even have a problem, but someone comes and says, if you do this, you'll benefit somehow, right? And that thing that they say you have to do is so easy to do, right? It's not something that requires any preparation or anything. It's always something really simple. In this case, bite an apple. In another case, it might be give me your password. You know what I mean? So we can do this or that for you and make your life better. It's always something very simple that they ask from you, and whatever it is that you do will create a lot of benefits for you. So it's really always a bit unrealistic. Do you understand? Am I being clear?
Sure. You always have to ask yourself, what's the agency of this, let's say in this case, the serpent? Why is it in the serpent's interests for you to do this and gain these benefits? You always have to ask yourself that, like, what's in it for you? What's your game? What is your objective? Because it's not doing it just because or for your sake. It is probably something else going on.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. They want something. And what do you think the serpent represents? Like, who's the serpent, really?
That I really don't know. I mean, in a sense, of course, it is some kind of an animal, like a clever animal in the garden. The cleverest, isn't that how it's described?
The most cunning.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's more than just a snake, right? Because snakes don't talk.
Well, it could be more than that. Let's say that it's the reptilian part of the brain, of the consciousness. Could that be it?
You don't see it as Satan.
I'm not sure that the connection is ever made clearly in the Bible between Satan and the serpent. I mean, Satan is simply, it's a very generic term for something adversarial or an adversary. So I suppose this serpent is definitely adversarial to God's law. So in that sense, he is Satan because he is adversarial to God's law and command. But it doesn't mean that he is the only manifestation of Satan. Maybe he's just an example of it. The first example of it, even.
Okay, so Eve takes a bite and then offers the fruit to Adam, and he takes a bite too, and then all of a sudden their eyes are opened and they realize they're naked and they cover themselves. Why did they all of a sudden feel shame about their nudity?
Well, I think what we are looking at here is a shift in consciousness. Before this point, they weren't really self-aware. It was just awareness. And now there is awareness and there is the awareness of itself, of the awareness.
Of oneself, yeah.
So there's a split, a bifurcation. Once again, as in creation, it's a split upon split upon split. Before you have this split, it's kind of unity. There's only awareness. So, and in this unity consciousness, there is no good or evil. It's only once there is a split that there is good and evil. Once you are aware of yourself, that you play a part in things, that you can grasp the concept of good and evil. Once you have this awareness of yourself, like you can see yourself from the outside. Before you were only looking outwards, now you're looking inwards, like from the outside. You might not like what you see, or you might be embarrassed about it, or you might want to hide it. And hiding it is, because if you can see it, that means everybody else can see it, right? And, no. You want things to be the way they were before, when you couldn't see it. And hiding is just a vain and futile attempt to go back to that sense, that state of not having that awareness. Like, if you hide it, if you can't see it, if you can't see it, it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, it's like sweeping something under the rug. It never works, does it?
No. Well, it's a bell you can't unring, and I think it's a point of no return. Like, innocence, purity, nakedness, I think they hinge upon the ignorance of you being naked, innocent, and pure. Because once you are aware of it, I mean, to be pure, innocent, it is unity. There's only one of you, right? But to be aware of them, now there's a split. There's an observer and that which is observed. It's no longer unified. And if it's no longer unified, it's no longer pure. It's no longer wholesome. It's no longer one. And
it's like you suddenly see yourself.
Yes.
And you suddenly open your eyes and you see yourself.
And once you're aware of it, you can no longer be it.
And see things you don't like,
But also once you're aware of it, you can no longer be it. Because to be it, to fully be it, and not just play a game or pretend, tell yourself I'm this, I'm that, and now I'm going to play that. To really be it, you have to be so present that you aren't even aware of it.
Yeah, you're not thinking about
that at all.
Yourself, actually. Yeah.
You lose the ability to fully be once you become aware of yourself. You know how children tend to be so pure. And then they become teenagers and they lose this purity. That's when they start to feel shame and they start hiding themselves, their bodies, and I think this story is eternal, but I think it does play out in our lives. And that's one way to see it, like the shift from childhood to puberty. Traditionally, this is also when children had to start pulling their own weight. So in that sense, they are expelled from Eden, where everything was provided for them. Now they see reality is a bit different. It's all work. It's not just play and eat. And at that point, I mean, they also start to defy you and your rules, the parent. And I would say the instinctive response of the parent is to put them to work. If they aren't gonna respect your rules, they are gonna have to contribute. You are not gonna do things for them without asking anything in return, because they are now insolent, ungrateful, rebellious. So, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Paradise. Now reality comes kicking in.
That gives me the perfect segue to move on to God's judgment and the expulsion from Eden. So there they are, covering themselves with fig leaves and hiding themselves from God. And God comes and says, Adam, where are you? Oh, I can't talk to you now. I'm naked. Well, how do you know you're naked? What have you done? And then he goes, the woman you gave me or made for me made me eat the fruit. And then she goes, it was a serpent who made me eat the fruit. So it's all a pointing finger fest.
Not taking
Yeah,
responsibility.
they're not really taking any ownership. And in some ways, Adam even, it almost feels like he's blaming God. I mean, you gave me the woman and she made me eat it. It was pretty
Well,
shameful.
it's a game of pointing fingers anyway, and even
Yeah.
that, coming up with excuses and pointing fingers is hiding your nakedness.
Yeah.
So he's not just literally hiding his nakedness with clothes, he's also doing it by not taking responsibility for it.
Doesn't really help, does it? Not taking ownership. I wonder what God would have done if they had said, yes, I ate of the fruit. I screwed up. I'm sorry. I wonder if all that happened after. I mean, he did ask him, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded that you should not eat? What if he had said, yes, I did. I'm sorry, I screwed up. Do you think that would have changed anything?
Well, that's a good question, but I don't think so, because at the end of the day, it's a bell you can't unring.
I don't think it would have changed much. Maybe the consequences would have been a bit less, maybe. I don't know. Okay, so in response to this, God issues punishments or consequences for each of the people involved. And he started with the serpent, then to Eve, and then finally to Adam. He followed the order of sin, I guess. I would like to discuss those consequences for each one of them with you. So let's just quickly read what happened to the serpent. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. You will eat dust for the rest of your life, right? Because he's going to be crawling on his belly. He's being put in his place. You're going to be among dirt. But also, I thought, is there any connection between the fact that we are made of dust as well, and that snake is going to be eating that dust?
Well, if he eats dust, he will eat our building blocks. I guess he will eat our shit, and he will eat our decaying corpses once we die. Point is, he's the lowest of the low, right? On land, anyway.
Yeah, he's been completely humiliated.
He's placed at the bottom to be stomped at and crawl in the dust.
The part that I actually had to look up because I couldn't understand was that part about the heel and the head and the bruising. Do you have any thoughts on that? I want to explore your thoughts on that first, and then I'll talk to you about what I found, because I just didn't understand it.
Right. Well, I mean, if it's crawling around on the dirt, the only thing it's going to reach is the heel of people. He shall bruise your head. That refers to the seed, right? The seed of the woman.
Yes, exactly.
So her offspring shall bruise the head.
And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Mm-hmm. So, do you have any specific thoughts on that, or should I share what I found?
No, to me it seems pretty straightforward, just that the man will step on the head of the snake or serpent, and the serpent will bite the heel of the man. Okay.
That makes sense. But in some ways, I felt like there was more to it, so I Googled it. And what I found was it's a prophecy. Because when he says that he will create enmity between her seed and its seed, and her offspring, her seed is eventually, well, all of mankind, but especially Jesus in a way is her seed alone, because a male was not involved in his conception. So they say that he's talking about Jesus in particular here, and it's like a prophecy saying, you're going to bite him and he's going to suffer, but then he's going to stomp on your head. What do you think about that?
Nothing spontaneous, but sounds interesting. I'll have to think about it.
Yeah, right?
Okay, so let's move on to the punishment of the woman.
To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you.
Yeah, well, he certainly makes it sound like a punishment. I mean, that which you desires rules over you, by definition. But it's interesting, this within pain you shall bring forth children. Does this mean that prior to this she could bring forth children without pain? Or was it just that the possibility to bring forth children is enabled and that will be painful?
It doesn't really say, does it? Though when he created man on the sixth day, like on chapter 1, it did say, be fruitful and multiply. So I gather that they already had the ability to multiply. What do you think?
Could be.
But now it would be in pain that women will do so. What do you think it means for God to tell her that her desire will be for her husband and he will rule over her? What do you think that means? Because like we started, as we discussed before, with a fairly equal relationship, and now we move on to this. What do you think about that? Do you think that means that the woman will be subordinate to the husband, or what do you think this means?
Well, I guess that what it means is that the woman will be ruled by her desire, and her desire rules over her.
I was wondering if it also could be an indication of the beginning of the battle of the sexes, like, because, yeah, it sounds as though the relationship will no longer be harmonious and it will be a battle of power between the two.
Well, I guess the battle in this is that she wants him, right? She wants her husband. She wants to own him. But it's the other way around. He owns her. So that will be a circle of sorrow. If you want something, I mean, you want to have it. And if you want to have it, you want to rule it. I think they are kind of two sides of the same coin. But that will rule over her instead. Her husband in this case. I mean, it is a covetous thing. When you covet something, you seek to have it, you seek to possess it, you seek to own it. But as long as you're coveting it, that thing will own you. On a more specific level, there's a hierarchy established, I suppose. They will not rule together as equals.
That is what it says, I guess. But do you see this as a prescription for gender roles, like women should be obedient and subservient? Or do you think this is just an indication of a power struggle? Do you think this is telling us how we should behave, or just telling it how it's going to be like?
It's more like just telling you this is what it's going to be like, and it's matter-of-factly. And I think it is in the nature of this thing that which you covet will rule you. That which you desire will rule you.
Yeah. Because I'm asking this question because I think a lot of people, well, not everybody, but a lot of people will think that this means that women should be subservient.
I think it means that women are subservient. I don't think that I don't think it is about what they should or shouldn't be. I think it is matter-of-factly. They are ruled by their passions, their desires, that makes them subservient.
Right, but not in terms of gender roles.
I mean, gender roles in and of itself suggest some kind of game. Some kind of you are playing two different parts in a stage drama or whatever, but this is not what it is. This is much more matter-of-factly. Somebody needs to call the shots, like somebody is the head of the family. And it's not the woman. It's not about whether the woman should clean or cook and whether the man should hunt. It's much more, at a much more abstract level. Who is ultimately in charge?
And I guess that's part of the punishment. And a hard pill to swallow, really, for women. It is a hard pill to swallow.
Well, the naked truth is a hard sell.
I want to resist it. Even just thinking about it makes me want to fight against it. But yeah, oops. That's why it was a punishment. Moving on. Otherwise I'll start crying or fighting. Okay, let's move on to the consequences for Adam.
Then to Adam he said, "Because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, You shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return.
So basically, from getting everything served to him on a silver platter, he needs to get busy to eat now. And it was going to be made extra hard for him. So not only will he have to work, but he'll have to work hard to source food. And that was the punishment, which reminds me of what you were saying before of, oh yeah, you defy me? Now, since you're all grown up and can do things on your own accord, you can also feed yourself. So grow up, start working. That kind of ties up nicely with what you were saying before, right?
Right.
Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, well, I think it is like just reality. I suppose God had to do this for them, and now they have to do it for themselves. But they weren't aware of it, how things really came about. It was just magic to them, how food was presented and given. The work behind it wasn't apparent until the eyes were opened and they were shown what was really behind it. It's one way to look at it anyway. But yeah, it sounds like farming anyway.
Yeah, it sure
Doesn't
does.
sound like hunting gathering.
And we all know that farming is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
From dust you are, and to dust you shall return. That is an indication of death.
Right. Question is if life really was eternal in the garden prior to them eating, or if it was just an illusion.
No, I don't think it was. Let's continue. So his ruling has been established. They all got consequences for their actions. And then it says Eve is named. And Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. And then God provides them with animal skins to cover themselves with. What is the significance of that? It's from fig leaves to leather.
Well, if you're gonna clothe yourself, hide yourself, let's do it properly.
Yeah, he gave them a more durable fabric, and I guess it provides more warmth. But also animals had to be sacrificed for it. So there was a sacrifice involved in this.
Yeah, I suppose. But doesn't mean it hadn't happened before, that animals were being killed and eaten. Or
well, no,
killed
they weren't at this point, no.
Repurposed.
No, at this point I don't think so. Because he had not given us permission yet to eat meat.
No, not us, but maybe they did.
Who's they?
God. Maybe God was wearing tunics of skin. Who knows? Because in the next line here it says, Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. Yeah. And that's after he has clothed them. So.
Okay, so that's another thing. He has become like one of us. So that means that, well, what I gather from that, which might not be correct, but it makes me wonder, does that mean that God also has evil in him?
Well, he certainly knows good and evil.
And why do you think it's okay for him to know good and evil and not for us to know good and evil?
Well, he liked us best when we were innocent.
Or could it be that we were not prepared to because it was like a magic pill? Here you go. Now you can see. It's like all of a sudden having the knowledge of how to do brain surgery, but you lack the fine motor skills necessary to actually do the surgery. I don't know. Maybe we weren't prepared for it as well, and that's why he didn't want us to do it. What I find interesting as well is that before they bit the fruit, Eve was actually easily tempted, really. It didn't take too much for her to fall. So in her already was that discontent or want for more, wouldn't you say?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
That even before she took a bite of the fruit, of the forbidden fruit, the fact that she was easily tempted, that it didn't take much, there must have been some sort of
Well, the
discontent.
only thing holding her back from doing it was fear of death. Or it was the word of God that held her back, but...
God-fearing, to be God-fearing.
Well, or specifically, like God had said that she would die, she didn't want to die, but then the serpent said that that was not the outcome.
Yeah.
Serpent said that the outcome was going to be that she was going to become like God. So...
If you think about what the serpent said, it wasn't entirely untrue. In fact, in a way, it wasn't untrue at all.
It wasn't untrue at all, no. It was more that he went against the will of God. Like, he went against the rules.
It was more like he was technically right. Do you know what I mean?
But the thing is, God couldn't tell them the truth, that they would become like him and know good and evil, because first of all, that would not be a deterrent. But second of all, speaking about good and evil to somebody that doesn't understand good and evil is pointless, isn't it? And I don't think Eve, when she did it, understood the concept of good and evil. It was after she had eaten the apple she understood that. But then it was already too late. Once you've done it, it's too late. Point of no return. She just did it because I guess she wanted to be like God. And that fear of dying was dispelled. The temptation definitely outweighed the warning. It was like what God had said had been dispelled. It held no more weight.
Yeah. So the fear of God, the way I see it is you need to be God-fearing to remain in paradise.
God's word was enough.
Yeah, you've got to respect his word. The fact that all he needed to say to her was, you will not die if you eat the fruit. The fear was removed, and then she was happy to take a risk or to defy God. So I guess there needs to be some sort of fear to stay on the straight and narrow.
If God had lied to her, she wasn't really defying him anymore, because what he had said wasn't true.
Yeah, she didn't trust God as well. That's true. She didn't trust in God, and she lost the fear of him as well.
Well, the trust had been undermined. I mean, it was a conflicting narrative being told.
Can you elaborate that?
Well, the serpent said that what God had said wasn't so. It wasn't going to be like God said. It was going to be something completely different. So I guess that's one part. And then I suppose the fruit in and of itself probably held some temptation. I mean, just the fact that God had pointed it out and said, no, not that one. That should probably already arouse the curiosity. So she was probably already very curious about it, but she just didn't dare to. But it didn't take that much to push her to the other side and actually go through with it. In a way, God laid out a discernment for them, or a judgment, all this is okay, but that isn't. So he set the stage for it, in a sense.
Yeah, he set the stage up for us to fall, but he also set the stage up for us to succeed, I was thinking, because if Eve hadn't felt that temptation, or if she hadn't fallen, I mean, we can feel tempted, right, to do things all the time, but if she had just not done it, then there wouldn't have been any of the consequences. It's okay to feel tempted. It's not okay to act upon the temptation.
Mm-hmm.
And if she hadn't, we would all still be in the Garden of Eden.
Possibly.
And it would have been an easy life. But then again, would it have been enough? You know, who knows? With our nature, human nature is such a... We have a constant state of discontent, I think, in general. There's always something more that we want.
There's always something driving your step and your actions, I suppose. But this transition also from the Garden of Eden to being expelled is that you have to work for what you want.
Yes. And also one could also say that idle hands do the devil's work, you know? In a way, we need to keep busy to keep ourselves out of trouble too.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy, and that's very accurate, I would say, about them eating of that fruit.
Speaking of the tree of life, that's where I wanted to go to.
Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever.
So they had access to that tree of life. They could have taken that fruit and they would have lived forever, and maybe they had eaten it, but now they couldn't eat it anymore because they have lost access to it. They had eternal life. One could say, well, but God said that if they ate from the fruit that they would die, but then they didn't die. But this is the death. We became mortals. We were eternal beings and we became mortal. That was the death.
Could be.
And only now has it been specified what the tree of life was afterwards. I don't think he told Adam anything about that other tree.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point that they probably ate from that tree while they were in the garden, but the moment they stop eating from it, that's when they become mortal. But it's interesting, even in Norse mythology you have this. They have the apples of the gods. They eat the apples to stay eternal. So it's not uniquely in the Bible.
Okay, so then, yeah, we get banished. We lose access to the fountain of youth. And we got expelled from Eden. And then he puts up a cherubim to protect that tree of life, I think. Yeah, no, to protect the Garden of Eden, to make sure we don't go back in again. So that's the end of chapter 3. What do you think this says about God's character after reading this?
He's a man of his word.
Agreed. And to trust him, whatever he says is. Even if we don't understand something, we should follow. He also put a distance between us and him, a huge one, from walking in the Garden of Eden alongside him. Now we cannot see him anymore, and we just need to have faith, that he exists.
Yeah, maybe there is a way to find your way back. Maybe you can create the garden yourself.
How so?
But let's say it from the perspective that it can represent childhood. I mean, if you have children of your own, you can create a garden for them. And then you become like a god to them. Now, this is not the original God and the original Adam and Eve, but it is an echo of that.
Okay, and now I would like to ask you personally, what part of all this, what big takeaway do you have from Genesis 3 or these two chapters? What's your biggest takeaway?
Well, if I'm gonna see it as an eternal story, I think I think the takeaway is that it works on so many levels. Like, you can see it as a transition from childhood to adulthood. You can see it as a transition from animal to man. You can see it as a transition from hunting and gathering to farming. You can see it as a change of consciousness from not being self-aware until being self-aware. It works on so many levels. It's much more than meets the eyes, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of those things that the more you think about it, the more ideas will come from it. For me, one thing that I took away from it was, so Adam and Eve made this big mistake. And from this mistake, all of their offspring and all of mankind are recipients of the same punishment. The negative things that came from it has affected us all throughout generations and generations and generations. And that got me thinking about how important it is to be good role models for our own children, to realize the effect we can have not only on our own children, but their children and their children after them.
The point is the needs of your children and this sense of wonder and magic and immortality. I mean, you shouldn't dispel it for them before they are ready. They should dispel it themselves. I guess that's the point. When they start challenging you of their own accord.
Yeah, to preserve the innocence for as long as we can.
The point is there shouldn't be any cracks in the facade. Let the children make those cracks. I mean, or perceive them themselves when they're ready.
Protect them from things that they can't fully understand anyway. Let them become curious when they naturally become curious, and don't give them information that they can't really process before they're ready to.
Exactly. These are things they need to figure out for themselves, or in an ideal world anyway.
That is one thing that is not happening at schools today. They're making decisions that should not be made, decisions that should be left to the parents. And that is really frustrating these days. And I'm sure that many of people who are watching this today will probably have stories to tell about it. We have one story about our child being asked what gender they thought they were.
In a health survey.
What? Ridiculous.
Well, it's gaslighting and very suggestive. You can look at it like school, at least here in Western countries, they have this humanist value, and it's not Christian at all. It's quite anti-Christian. And I would say that what's going on is that the children are pulled out of the garden at an early age, even before the school age with daycare and stuff, and they never really get to experience the garden.
Exactly. They're cutting short their time in the garden and taking them out into a world which they don't understand and will become incredibly vulnerable for it. It's just the wrong thing to do.
And it's, it's something, it's a word frequently used, like it's to be contained, and that's what the garden is. It's a place where you're contained.
And safe.
Yes.
That was interesting. I didn't expect to go there, but there we went. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Arvid. I really enjoyed it.
So did I.
Good. And I really would love to hear our viewers' thoughts on chapters 2 and 3 of the Genesis. What was your biggest takeaway? Please let us know in the comments below. We'd love to read them, and perhaps if you have any questions or anything, just let us know. And maybe we can share some of your comments in our next video. I really just wanted this to become a conversation, not just with my guest today, but also with my viewers. And that's it for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And I'm sending lots of love your way. Take care.